second panelist, Jaymes O'Farron. Jaymes considers community shaping to be his primary art form, alongside his entrepreneurial and world-building endeavors. He currently is running 2 podcasts, one of which is nearing its 3rd year anniversary and which has over 40 episodes recorded. Tonight, he will be discussing some of the things he has learned about shaping the community around the podcast and why it can change the world. Jaymes, take it away.
Immortality. Throughout history, one of the deepest and most abiding and universal urges of humanity is to extend our existence, to extend our reach, our influence. Nowadays, when we think about immortality, we think perhaps of becoming a vampire or of uploading our consciousness into a databank. But that's not how the ancients saw it. The ancients saw immortality as something that was attained through influence of generations upon generations, through children, through building communities, through building nations and empires, crafting a community that extends beyond yourself and into the future. What's fascinating is that while that's an older perspective, there's so much more scope for doing that now through modern technology, such as podcasts. But how does a podcast work with community? How does that actually work? Because when you think about it, a podcast is you talking into the void, into the ether. There's no one talking back at you unless you're pre-recording them in the show. And then that's just you and them. That's just both of you talking into the void together, shouting into infinity and hoping someone is out there eventually somewhere listening. It's not really community. It's fun. It's interesting. My first podcast was sparked because my friend and I had a ton of conversations that lasted well into the night. We figured we should inflict this upon other people. And so we started recording those conversations and inflicting them on other people, and people ended up enjoying them, which is kind of weird. But here we are 3 years later, and we actually have a reasonably good following and a lot of great conversations and a community around them. So how did we get from 2 friends babbling about books we like and shows we don't like and philosophy and history and politics and theology to an actual community of people around common ideas and values? How did that happen? It wasn't us just sitting there and talking, because talking into the air does not a community make. When we first started sharing our ideas and our thoughts, we mostly just rambled. We picked a topic that we thought was interesting. We just started talking around that idea. We put out there, a few of our friends listened to it, engaged with it. Once we got a few people who were listening, sometimes we could persuade them to ask us questions. We could actually get some feedback on our episodes. We could actually respond to some of them. We would say things that would spark particular people's interest and start a conversation going, which is better than just shouting into the void. We actually had a relationship between us and our listeners. There was a dialogue. Pretty soon, like in the first dozen episodes or so, we had developed enough of a conversation in the comments and things like that on Facebook and elsewhere that we were able to actually do a Q&A episode. We told people in advance, hey, the next episode's topic is completely up to you. You can send in questions that you want us to ramble about, send us a zinger or 2, and we get to be able to actually converse with you and answer what you got. We got some really crazy questions. Most of them were from my brother, who was just mean, but we had a lot of fun with them. We took them and we ran with them, and it was a great hit. We've done that, I think, twice now since then, and they've all been great hits. But that was a dialogue. That was a conversation between people who were listening to us and us. So we weren't shouting into the void anymore. The void had answered back. Slightly scary. But a one-way conversation between 2 people and a few people does not make A community. See, a community is more than that. For a community to be able to persist, to impact and grow and influence beyond the people who sparked the community, it has to have a life of its own. A community must have a common goal. It has to have common values about how they achieve that goal. There must be relationships within the community. If you draw a diagram of a person and then their threads going out, conversations going out to all these different people like a spider network, and none of those people are talking to each other, that's not a community. It's a cult. Not necessarily a good thing. Not what we're aiming for here. What we want in order to create a community out of a podcast, in order to take the ideas and the passion that we want to share, the values and the vision that we want to influence people with, to carry beyond and create a dynasty, a heritage, a tradition that can make our ideas immortal. Whether that's a good idea or not, I'm not even touching on that. You have to get people talking to each other. It can't just be you talking to them. They have to talk to each other. That's the key. So how do you get a medium that is designed to be people isolated, sitting in their cars or eating dinner or taking a shower, independently, individually, listening to you talking? How do you get them to talk to each other? So what we did is we created a Discord server. I love Discord servers. Discord servers are awesome. There is a Nerdmasters Discord server, if you didn't know. I'll drop a link in there later on, unless somebody else beats me to it. When you have a place for people to mutually share your podcast, they can start talking to each other about the topics you bring up. And when that happens, you're able to actually create stronger conversations, not just you talking back and forth with them, but them talking together and challenging what you have, coming up with new ideas, carrying your ideas further, and creating what truly is a community. So instead of just making it the podcast, because the podcast itself does not make a community. It can't. That's not what the format is made for. The podcast became the centerpiece around which a community formed within a separate medium. We were able to get into the Discord server. We shared memes with each other around common topics about stuff that we like to talk about. YouTube videos, memes, lots of memes, extra memes everywhere, memes all over the place memes. We were buried in memes. That was part of our culture and we enjoyed it. We made memes about theology, made memes about holidays, made memes about all kinds of things. And it created an engagement, a fun, happy, lighthearted way for us to converse with each other and connect around the qualities and the values that were of interest in our podcast. We took what was good about our podcast and we brought it into the chat form where people could converse about them freely amongst each other. And then the podcast came to serve the server instead of the other way around. The podcast became a catalyst to prompt new conversations, new discussions, bringing up new resources that stirred up more discussions in the server itself. And that is where the power truly lies. See, when a podcast becomes the prompt that sparks discussion, that's when a podcast becomes a community. And that's when the influence can spread beyond the lifespan of people who are doing the podcast. Because then you can have people who are in the community stand up, become guests, which we did a lot. We do a lot of guests on our podcast. Bring them in. They come in, they join the conversation. And hey, who knows? If Ravi, my co-host, and I decide to go off some other direction, somebody else might take up the mantle and do something similar. That's possible now because we created a community around the ideas of our podcast. So that's the goal, to stop just shouting into the void. Not just hearing an echo back, but to create an entire village within which your podcast can serve a purpose. And thereby, you might gain immortality. Thank you.
Game over.